Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. Good to see you all. Tonight we're continuing with our study of Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Tonight we'll begin chapter 8. Chapter 8 is entitled Attaining the Supreme. And the main topic of chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita, Attaining the Supreme, is how to die. How to leave this mortal frame, how to leave this material world, which is something which all of us are going to have to deal with at some point in time, sooner or later. So attaining the Supreme will give the devotee of Krishna the knowledge of how to leave this material world and to transcend this material energy and return home back to Godhead. So we'll begin the study of chapter 8. And as usual, if you have any questions, any comments as we go, then please ask. In Surrender Unto Me, Gurujan Prabhu writes, Arjuna will now inquire about the 6 terms Krishna used at the end of chapter 7, Brahman, Adhyatma, Kama, Adhibhuta, Adhideva, and Adhijagya. Krishna describes them one by one in order in which Arjuna asked them about. Later in the chapter, Krishna also discusses Yoga Mishra Bhakti, devotional service mixed with yoga, Shuddha Bhakti, unmixed pure devotional service, and the factors that determine a soul's destination when it leaves the body. So text number 1. Arjuna inquired, O my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me. So, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that in this chapter, Lord Krishna answers different questions, beginning with what is Brahman. Krishna also explains karma, devotional service, and yoga principles, and devotional service in its pure form. So the first question asked by Arjuna is, what is Brahman? So this is the basic topic or the basic question which must be answered first of all in spiritual life. In spiritual life, we must answer this topic, and we must understand it clearly. In other words, we are not the body, we are the soul. And when you understand that you are not the body, but you are the soul, then you have begun spiritual life. At least Prabhupada says, at least theoretically. In theory, we must understand. We are not the body, we are the soul. And after theoretically understanding this point, right? After understanding it in theory, then we have to realize the point. We have to come to the understanding that we are not the body, we're the soul. We have to understand our spiritual essence. So this is the first question asked by Arjuna. And Krishna explains this point throughout the Bhagavad Gita. And it is the beginning of spiritual life. Srimad Bhagavatam begins the same way, by understanding the difference between Sat and Asat. Sat means eternality. Asat means the temporary nature of this world. Right? Asat means understanding that which is temporary or matter. Sat means to understand that which is eternal and spiritual. So a devotee needs to understand both. He needs to understand what is spiritual, what is material, and learn to differentiate. And in that way, one can advance in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada then says, Krishna is Purushottama, the Supreme Person, which means that Arjuna was putting these questions not simply to a friend, but to the Supreme Person, knowing him to be able to give definitive answers. So, if you want to understand the absolute truth, you need to approach Krishna or Krishna's representative, which is what Krishna mentions in the beginning of chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita. Evam parampara praptam imam rajashiyo vidu. That we understand the absolute truth by approaching Krishna's representative. We approach Krishna directly, and then we approach Krishna's representative if Krishna is not physically present. So this is the questions that Arjuna is asking, and here we're going to hear Krishna's answers one by one as we go through. So the Bhagavad Gita is questions and answers, perfect questions, perfect answers, and that's the way to understand the absolute truth properly. Text number 2. Who is the Lord of sacrifice, and how does he live in the body? O Madhusudana. And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? So in the next 2 verses, Krishna will quickly answer Arjuna's first 6 questions. So we're going to hear Krishna's various answers to Arjuna. And then Arjuna's final question, which he's asked in the opening 2 verses, how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? That will become the major topic of this chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. How do we understand Krishna at the time of death? In other words, how to die, how to leave this material world. So, Srila Prabhupada writes, the word prayana kala is very significant because whatever we do in life will be tested at the time of death. What should be the position of those constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness at the final moment? How can a person fix his mind on Krishna's lotus feet at such a time? So, in spiritual life, we practice sadhana bhakti, Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, which means we follow guidelines or rules or regulations, how to serve Krishna. This is called, sadhana means practice. We practice devotional service. We practice serving Krishna. And the purpose of this practice is that so that we can remember Krishna at the time of death. That's why we do all our practice. That's why we chant the holy names of Krishna. That's why we perform sadhana bhakti, so that we can remember Krishna at the time of death. Right? It's all practice, right? Until we get to the point of spontaneous attachment, where we will just remember Krishna at the time of death. So this chapter will teach us the process and the principles of how to think of Krishna at the time of death. Prabhupada says, Lord of sacrifice may refer to either Indra or Vishnu. In answer, this is one of Arjuna's questions. Both Indra and Vishnu are worshipped by Jagya. But who is actually the Lord of Jagya, and how the Lord is residing within the body of the living entity? Arjuna addresses Krishna as Madhusudana, so that Krishna might kill the demoniac doubts that arise in Arjuna's mind. Actually, these questions, which are doubts, should not have arisen in the mind of a Krishna conscious devotee. So once again, we should understand that Krishna's we should understand that Krishna is speaking the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna for our benefit. Arjuna is a Krishna conscious devotee. He is a prema bhakta. He is one of Krishna's eternal Nityaparikas, one of Krishna's associates. So there is no chance that Arjuna will ever forget Krishna. That's not possible. Right? It's not possible for Arjuna to forget Krishna, but we have forgotten Krishna. So therefore, the Bhagavad Gita is being spoken to us and for us by Krishna. So Arjuna is asking the questions, Krishna is giving the answers for this reason, so that we can transcend this material energy once and for all. Text number 3. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma or fruitive activities. So here Krishna is answering 3 of Arjuna's questions. First question, what is Brahman? So Krishna says, the indestructible transcendental living entity is Brahman. Then what is the self? And Krishna says, his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. The self is the spiritual spark or the living entity. As Prabhupada says, the constitutional position of the living entity is different from the position he takes in the material world. So the self, Jivera Swarupahoy Krishnera Nichadas, Lord Chaitanya explains, who are we? The self is the eternal servant of Krishna. We are spiritual and we are Krishna's eternal servant. And the third question is, what is karma? And Prabhupada says, when the living entity is in material consciousness, he has to take on various bodies in the material world. That is called karma, or varied creation by the force of material consciousness. That is karma. Karma means when you perform material activities in this world. So Srila Prabhupada says in this verse, Brahman is indestructible and eternal. Beyond Brahman, there is Parabrahman. In material consciousness, the living entity tries to be the Lord of matter. But in Krishna consciousness, his position is to serve Krishna. When the living entity is in material consciousness, he takes on various bodies. That is called karma, or varied creation, by the force of material consciousness. So Krishna is answering these questions of Arjuna so that we can understand the absolute truth very concisely. Actually, in the the truth spoken concisely is true eloquence. Sometimes people speak, even in spiritual circles, they speak very, how do you call it? Very, in a very long-winded way. They fluff, or they go on and on. But actually, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains, the truth spoken concisely is true eloquence. Right? That is true eloquence. So we should speak like that. And that's how Krishna is the perfect teacher. In the Bhagavad Gita, that's how Krishna speaks, eloquently, right? Concisely speaks the truth. So he's answered 3 of Arjuna's questions just in one shloka, one verse. Text number 4. O best of the embodied beings, the physical nature, which is constantly changing, is called Adhibhuta, the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called Adhidaiva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the Supersoul in the heart of every embodied being, am called Adi Yagya, the Lord of sacrifice. So, here, the first question is, what is Adhibhuta? Prabhupada says the physical nature is constantly changing. Material bodies generally pass through 6 stages. They are born, they grow, they remain for some duration, they produce some byproducts, they dwindle, and then they vanish. This physical nature is called Adhibhuta and is created at a certain point and will be annihilated at a certain point. Krishna is the ultimate governor of the ever-changing material nature. So this physical nature is called Adhibhuta. What is the nature of this material world? It means that everything is changing constantly. Birth, death, old age, disease, there are constant changes in this material world. That does not exist in the spiritual nature, right? Prabhupada's guru says, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he says that birth, death, old age, and disease are conspicuous by their absence in the spiritual world. There is no birth, death, old age, disease. They do not exist in the spiritual world. Then the second question in this verse is, what is Adhidaiva? Prabhupada says the conception of the universal form of the Supreme Lord, which includes all the demigods and their different planets, is called Adhidaivata. Srila Prabhupada further describes the universal form, the Adhidaivata Virat Rupa, in his purport to Bhagavatam 2.1.29. The conception of the Virat Rupa, or the gigantic form of the Supreme Lord, is said to include the dominating demigods as well as the dominated living entities. Even the minutest part of a living being is controlled by the empowered agency of the Lord. Since the demigods are included in the gigantic form of the Lord, worship of the Lord, whether in his gigantic material conception or in his eternal transcendental form as Lord Krishna, also appeases the demigods and all the other parts and parcels, as much as watering the root of a tree distributes energy to all of the tree's outer parts. Consequently, for a materialist also, Worship of the universal gigantic form of the Lord leads to the right path. One need not risk being misled by approaching many demigods for fulfillment of material desires. The real entity is the Lord himself, and all others are imaginary, for everything is included in him. So what is Atideva? It is the universal form. It is this universe, which includes all the different demigods on the different planets. Adhidevata. So this is Krishna's creation. Krishna's creation includes all of the demigods and all of the living entities within this material world. So Krishna is giving a very succinct understanding of his creation. And then the next question is, who is the Ati Jagya? Prabhupada says, present in the body, along with the individual soul, is the super soul, a plenary representation of Lord Krishna. The super soul is called the Paramatma, or Ati Jagya, and is situated in the heart. So Krishna is giving the understanding of the super soul, his creation, the living entities who enter into the creation. He's speaking about the entire absolute truth in, well, at least the material energy and how it functions with the super soul and the jivas within one verse. Prabhupada says in this verse, the physical nature is constantly changing. It is called Adibhuta. The universal form is called Adidevata. Paramatma is called Adhijagya. The functions of these different manifestations of Krishna automatically become clarified for the pure devotee. So we're getting an understanding of how this material world works so that we can become detached from it. Because it is just a temporary abode which we find ourselves in at this point in time. Okay, text number 5. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So for the next group of verses, from text 5 to text 8, these 4 verses, Krishna is going to answer Arjuna's question, what is the result if one thinks of Krishna at the time of death? So in other words, how to die in this material world. This is the subject matter of the rest of this chapter, basically, and especially the next 4 verses. Krishna will answer this question. So, Srila Prabhupada writes, the word smaran, remembering, is important. Remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life. If one wants to achieve success at the end of his life, the process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly chant the Maha Mantra. A very beautiful commentary by Srila Prabhupada. We should practice throughout our life remembering Krishna. Prabhupada says the best is that from the beginning of our life, we practice remembering Krishna. Of course, many of us do not take to the process of Krishna consciousness until later in life. So as Prabhupada points out, it's not how you begin the race, it's how you finish the race. So even though we have not practiced throughout our life remembering Krishna, at the end of our life, if we practice remembering Krishna, then we can go back to him. So what is the best way to remember Krishna? The best way to remember Krishna is chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. This is said to be the best way to attain Leela Smaranam. This is explained by Jiva Goswami in the Bhakti Sandarbha, I believe, that the goal of Krishna consciousness is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. What is the most effective way to always remember Krishna? It is by chanting the holy names of Krishna. In Kali Yuga, that will lead the mind to eventually think of Krishna. So that is the process which we need to practice. Prabhupada says in the purport that Lord Chaitanya has advised that one be as tolerant as a tree. There may be so many impediments for a person chanting Hare Krishna. Nonetheless, tolerating all these impediments, one should continue to chant Hare Krishna, so that the end of one's life, one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness. So that is the system. The system is that we practice remembering Krishna throughout our life, which means we have to chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. In a humble state of mind, being more tolerant than a tree, offering respect to others, not expecting respect for ourselves. Text number 6. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So Prabhupada explains in the purport that one's thoughts during one's life accumulate to influence one's thoughts at the moment of death. So this life creates one's next life. If one lives in the mode of goodness and always thinks of Krishna, it is possible to remember Krishna at the end of one's life. That will help one be transferred to the transcendental nature of Krishna. If one is transcendentally absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, not material. Therefore, the chanting of the Hare Krishna is the best process for successfully changing one's state of being at the end of life. So, this is the goal of human life. To practice thinking of Krishna. It is a practice which we need to practice during our life. So whatever you are thinking of during your life, or in other words, when you're in distress, and the time of death is a very stressful time, when we're during our life, we will take shelter in our mind of certain things during stressful situations. So when we're feeling stress, our mind will take shelter of particular things in order to assist us, in order to give us comfort. So we have to practice during our life taking shelter of Krishna, so that at the time of death, when the mind is disturbed and the mind is looking for shelter, it will go to Krishna as opposed to some material thing. So it's an art, it's a science, it's a practice. And we have to gradually practice remembering Krishna. So at the time of death, our mind will go to Krishna. Prabhupada writes that Maharaj Bharata, although a great personality, thought of a deer at the time of his life. And so in his next life, he was transferred into the body of a deer. Although as a deer, he remembered his past activities, he had to accept the animal body. Of course, one's thoughts during the course of one's life accumulate to influence one's thoughts at the moment of death. So this life creates one's next life. If in one's present life one lives in the mode of goodness and always thinks of Krishna, it is possible for one to remember Krishna at the end of one's life. That will help one be transferred to the transcendental nature of Krishna. If one is transcendentally absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, spiritual, not material. So this is the basic principle. The basic principle is to remember Krishna, practice remembering Krishna, and then at the time of death, we will naturally, our mind will take shelter of Krishna. Text number 7. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time, carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me, and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. Prabhupada says in the purport that this instruction is very important for all men engaged in material activities. The Lord does not say one should give up prescribed duties. One can continue them and at the same time think of Krishna by chanting. This will free one from material contamination and engage the mind and intelligence in Krishna. By chanting, one will be transferred to Krishna Loka without a doubt. So we don't have to artificially give up activities and attempt to engage in meditation and fixing the mind on Krishna, which is recommended and it's also possible, but it's very difficult for a neophyte spiritual practitioner. It's much more effective for someone who's still under the control of the material energy. It is much more effective to act within this world, but while acting in this world, one meditates upon Krishna. To sit down and just do meditation, it's very difficult for most of us. To chant more than 16 rounds a day is difficult for most of us. So therefore, we are encouraged to act in Krishna's service and to fix our mind on Krishna while acting, while doing our service. And if we do this, and we become adept in thinking of Krishna at the time of death, it will be easy to think of Krishna. Text number 8. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he or Partha is sure to reach me. Prabhupada says in the purport that in this verse, Krishna stresses the importance of remembering him. One's memory of Krishna is revived by chanting. By chanting, one's ear, tongue, and mind are engaged. This mystic meditation is easy to practice and it helps one attain Krishna. So we need to practice remembering Krishna throughout our life. And the best way, as Prabhupada points out, the most effective way to focus on Krishna is to chant the holy names of Krishna. Right. And by this process, Prabhupada is emphasizing again and again in each of these verses, what is the most effective way to think of Krishna, to remember Krishna? Right? It is to chant the holy names of Krishna. Text number 9. One should meditate on the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, as he who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, and who is always a person. He is luminous like the sun, and he is transcendental beyond this material nature. So, Prabhupada mentions in the purport that the process of thinking of Krishna is mentioned in this verse. The foremost point is that he is not impersonal. One cannot meditate on something impersonal. That is very difficult. The process of thinking of Krishna, however, is very easy and is factually stated herein. Therefore, intelligent persons avoiding speculation should accept what is stated in the Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam, and follow the principles they set down. This will lead one to understanding. So this is Krishna's summary of how we should meditate on him, how we should give up our attachment to this material world and focus our mind on him. Gurujan Prabhu then says, in text 10 to 13, Krishna will explain the practices of these yogis, who are also described in Bhagavad Gita 7:29. So, which yogis is Krishna referring to? Those whose bhakti is mixed with aspirations of a yogi seeking liberation from the cycle of birth and death. So, text number 10. One who, at the time of death, fixes his life air between the eyebrows and, by the strength of yoga, with an undeviating mind, engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord, in full devotion will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, Prabhupada says, at the time of death, the mind must be fixed in devotion to Krishna, because a pure devotee is always engaged in Krishna consciousness. At death, he can remember Krishna by his grace. So, whichever path we take, the goal is to remember Krishna at the time of death. The yogis, they practice the Ashtanga Yoga process. In other words, they engage in an inactive spiritual practice, which leads them to focus the mind on Krishna. That is not easy for people in the Kali Yuga. Therefore, those in the Kali Yuga are recommended to perform devotional service, devotional activities dedicated for the pleasure of Krishna, and to chant his holy name constantly. And in this way, they become purified in due course of time. Text number 11. Persons who are learned in the Vedas, who utter Omkara, and who are great sages in the renounced order, enter into Brahman. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now briefly explain to you this process by which one may attain salvation. So in the purport, Prabhupada explains, Krishna has recommended the practice of Sat Chakra Yoga, in which one places the air of life between the eyebrows, Brahman. Although one without a second has various manifestations and features, especially for the impersonalists. The syllable Om is identical with Brahman. Krishna here explains the impersonal Brahman, in which the renounced order of sages enter. So, Prabhupada then says, the practice of celibacy is very essential for spiritual advancement. But at the moment, such brahmachari life is not at all possible. The social construction of the world has changed so much that there is no possibility of one's practicing celibacy from the beginning of life. Unless one practices celibacy, advancement in spiritual life is very difficult. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has announced that in Kali Yuga, no process of realizing Krishna is possible except chanting Hare Krishna. So this is the process. The process is chanting the holy names of Krishna. Otherwise, it's very difficult to, as is mentioned in this particular verse, to practice celibacy, to meditate on the Brahman, to chant Om, to attain perfection. That path is very difficult. But Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement is such that one can simply live in household life. He can have husband or wife and children, and one can focus on serving Krishna. So one can live in this world, dedicate his life to serving Krishna, and one can attain perfection. That is the simplicity of the practice within this day and age. Text number 12. The yogic situation is that of detachment from all sensual engagements, closing all the doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life air at the top of the head. One establishes himself in yoga. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets. So it's a very powerful verse. And Prabhupada says in the purport, Om, Brahman, and Krishna are not different. The impersonal sound of Krishna is Om, but the sound Hare Krishna contains Om. If one quits his body, chanting Hare Krishna, he certainly reaches Goloka Vrindavan. And it is the sound vibration which represents the Supreme. However, when one chants the Hare Krishna mantra, Prabhupada says Radha and Krishna are dancing on the tongue, and one will enter into a stage of bliss in which one transcends this material world once and for all. Text number 14. For one who always remembers me, without deviation, I am easy to obtain. O son of Prita, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So Prabhupada mentions in the purport that this verse especially describes the final destination attained by the unalloyed devotees who serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead in Bhakti Yoga. Previous verses have mentioned 4 different kinds of devotees: the distressed, the inquisitive, those who seek material gain, and the speculative philosophers. Different processes of liberation have been described: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Hatha Yoga. The principles of these yoga systems have some bhakti added, but this verse particularly mentions pure Bhakti Yoga, without mixtures of karma, jnana, or hatha. As is indicated by the words ananya chetaha, in pure Bhakti Yoga, the devotee desires nothing but Krishna. A pure devotee does not desire promotion to heavenly planets, nor does he seek oneness with the Brahma Jyoti, or salvation or liberation from material entanglement. A pure devotee does not desire anything. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the pure devotee is called Nishkama, which means he has no desire for self-interest. Perfect peace belongs to him alone, not to them who strive for personal gain. Whereas a Jnana Yogi, Karma Yogi, or Hatha Yogi has his own selfish interests, a perfect devotee has no desire other than to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Lord says that for anyone who is unflinchingly devoted to him, he is easy to attain. So Prabhupada explains the special qualification of the pure devotee is that he is always thinking of Krishna without deviation, without considering time or place. There should be no impediments. Krishna is especially inclined to those who always serve him without deviation. For such a devotee, Krishna is easily attained. Krishna cannot forget his pure devotee for a moment. This is the great blessing of chanting the Maha Mantra. Right? So Krishna cannot forget us for even a moment. And for a devotee, there is no impediment. Nam namakari bahuda nija savashaktis tatrapita niyamitaha smaranena kalaha etadrishi tavakripa bhagavan mamapi tudaiva midrisham ihajani nanuragaha. Lord Chaitanya teaches us that there are no hard and fast rules for chanting the holy names of Krishna. Right? We can chant the holy names of Krishna in any time, place, or circumstance. Right? As Prabhupada says here, there are no impediments. The only impediment is our lack of desire to remember Krishna. So by chanting the holy name, then we can fix our mind on Krishna in all places at all times. Text number 15. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. So Prabhupada is explaining that one who surrenders to Krishna loses his desire to take birth in this material world again. That is the proof of how much we are advancing in our Krishna consciousness. If we're truly advancing in Krishna consciousness, we will be losing our desires to take birth again in this material world, right? And the only desire which will be manifesting in our consciousness is to serve Radha and Krishna perpetually in this material world. And the final verse for tonight, verse number 16. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. And Prabhupada says in the purport, all kinds of yogis eventually have to attain devotional perfection in Bhakti Yoga before they can go to Krishna's abode and never return. Those who attain the highest material planets are again subjected to repeated birth and death. So it's very clear from Prabhupada's purports and from Krishna's instructions in this 8th chapter so far that the goal of life is to fix the mind on Krishna. And if we remember Krishna at the time of death, we will attain his abode. But if we have selfish material desires, we'll be born again within this material creation. So I'll stop here. Are there any questions or comments on what we discussed? Thank you all for coming. We'll see you next week. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Bol.